The Left Wing Backs coverage of the Carlow Football Championships is brought to you in association with Talbot Fitness Carlow, Connolly's Top Line Bagnallstown, Scott's Bouncing Castles, J&J Services Tullow, Seamus Byrne Electrical, your number one for pitch floodlighting installation, Milano's Takeaway Bagnallstown, PFT Travel, the Arboretum Garden Centre, Ray Whelan Limited, Earth Spas and Carlow Electrical Services. Yes, hello and welcome along to the latest offering here on the Left Wing Back. First round action took place at the weekend, got off to a bang, and with me today to discuss all the action, different talking points, is Mr. Mick Kehoe. How are you getting on, sir?
Good, Kevin, and yourself?
Sure, flying it. Listen, thanks for coming on. I know that this isn't really your thing, and you've said it several times. We managed to twist your arm, and we're delighted to have you. So thanks for doing that.
No problem.
Well, listen, we sent you out and about at the weekend, and we'll come to those games in a few moments' time. A few general points, I think, first, Mick, that I'd like to have a little chat about. And the most noteworthy thing, and I don't like to be comparing football to hurling, because in many ways it is apples to oranges, but there's a notable difference in the structure. So obviously we've got 5 rounds of senior hurling, as you all know. We go into semi-finals and into finals, and many people feel that, in the last round of the senior hurling championship, in the group stages, into the semi-finals, that's when it kind of comes to life. And I was left personally a little bit disappointed by how the championship fizzled out. But come Thursday and come Friday, you could just see the little bit of extra bite I felt in the games, in the sense that teams have to go for it. There is the 3 games in the group. There is the head-to-head, which comes in around 3, and that can be the drawback of the whole thing, of course. But by and large, a championship for me is when teams go out and have to go for it. There's something at stake. There's no shadow boxing. I'm not going to say there's no targeting of games, because you probably will still have a little bit of that. But it had that feel for me, Mick, that probably the hurling didn't have. Now, I'd just like to know, the games that you were at then at the weekend mightn't have always had the highest of quality, and those were the double headers on Saturday and Sunday in Netwatch Cullen Park. But is there any merit in that, do you think? And did you get that similar kind of vibe, given the fact that you had an involvement, I suppose, at Ballinkillen as well, and saw it from the hurling side?
Okay, well, in relation to the difference between the hurling and football, in terms of the importance or the bite in those championship matches, what I would have really realised from Ballinkillen this year is that I think really once Ballinkillen had gotten the win over Michael, they would have felt quite confident of making a semi-final, kind of irrespective of the results then against Rangers and St. Mullins. And that's not kind of disrespecting any other team, or it's not being defeatist with those 2 big teams. But with the 4 positions available, let's say Nave Breed are still in a bit of transition really from where they used to be, and they're in the senior championship, but they're finding it difficult. So once Ballinkillen got that win over Michael, you're more or less fairly confident of making a semi-final. Obviously, the football is very different. You really have to hit the ground running. There's no guarantees of making a semi-final at all. It's the top 2 going through the semi-finals and the others in quarters. The other thing is, if you don't get a great start, Kevin, if you don't get a great start as one of your 3 matches, it really piles the pressure on match 2 and especially match 3, and you could really be fighting for your life. So there's definitely an added urgency in the football championship.
Yeah, and you're pretty well placed, Mick, not just with your involvement in Ballinkillen this year, but also the last few years before that with St. Patrick's. So you get that whole comparison, and you understand it from both sides. My own feel would be like, whenever I was going to play, say, a game or whatever, you need that little bit of, when you remove the safety net, it brings out the best in people. And the more games that you have where that's the situation, it might not always lead to the best quality, but you're going to get that little bit of urgency. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you have to have an element of jeopardy. It's when you have jeopardy is when it brings pressure, it brings an imperative. Like, what's the old saying, that if you can't lose, you can't win? Ever heard that one? So, but it's true. So if there is a danger of, listen, if we don't get a good result here, if we don't put up some sort of showing, it could really spiral out of control for us to get into a tailspin. And a couple of times there in recent past there with St. Patrick's, as you mentioned, you go out and suffer a loss the first day. It can really, really pile the pressure on for game 2 and game 3, and like the last thing you want is to be going into the third group game. Number one, like really needing a win to get into the quarter final or semi final is one thing. To be avoiding relegation, like it can happen like that.
Yeah, absolutely. We see it year on year where a team is in a final, it could be in relegation final the next year. It lends itself to that. And yeah, down through the years, I've occasionally been critical of the structure when it comes to round 3, and God knows it'll probably happen this year. But I'm all for it at round 1 and round 2 for sure. And
Yeah.
I think we've got some cracking games to talk about. I'm a big fan of the Intermediate Championship in Carlow. I just think year on year, like what I just kind of touched on there, you don't know what's going to happen. I think the quality has improved significantly. Like, I did not foresee a situation to the right where St. Patrick's were going to steamroll Naomh Eoin. I've got to be honest. I was quite disappointed what I saw from Naomh Eoin. I wouldn't think they'd allow that to happen a second time or a third time, but they were poor. Now, on the flip side of that, I was really impressed with Carlow, Mick. Obviously, you laid down some solid foundations there and made the progress. You could see how well they're coached. You could see the bit of purpose they had. To be honest with you, I was trying to find out there. I think Will Dorn is still running from that game the other night. He never stops. He was going in the 61st minute the same as he's going in the first. And I think he's in around the same age as me. I don't know how he's doing it, but they have a number of guys that are talented footballers. They've got the pace. They've got a little bit of know-how. And I think they're ready to make a step this year. Obviously, you've seen a lot of those guys up close.
Yeah. Look at the first game. We'll see how they perform the second game now, and that's true of both St. Patrick's and Michael. I would also believe that Michael are more than capable of picking up their performances and could have a big say in the championship yet, for after being in the last 2 finals. From a Tullow perspective, from a St. Patrick's perspective, yeah, they have a lot of good players, and like they're a really great bunch of lads. And forget my role in it there. Alan Costello's come in there now. He's new and fresh and very experienced. We did a good handover there. We had a good conversation, sharing of information and bits and pieces like that. But there's also great continuity there with the like of Sham Comerford and Niall Gorman as well. Really capable guys. Tom Abbey is there as a continuous feature as well as a kit man. John Kenny is another kind of ever present on that. So they've probably gotten that balance right between freshening it up, which was important, very important, but there's also continuity for players as well. The other thing is, and like this is true, I think this relates to Clonmore, there's youth, there's young fellas coming through, and like a young guy coming through with lots of energy and impetus and freshness, he revitalises a guy in his 30s. So when you mentioned Will Dorn, a fabulous guy, fabulous player, and a really, really superb athlete. But he's going to be freshened up by the like of Keane Gorman Comerford coming of age and Cahill Healy coming of age. So it's a rising tide lifts all boats there, and I think those two teams, Clonmore and St. Patrick's, will have a big say in things yet.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, look, those names you put out there were definitely impressive. I think the second game, obviously, as a contest on Thursday night was a lot closer. It was interesting. Like, I was looking at Kieran Pender, and it was great to see him back and in good shape. He looked so dangerous in there. I mean, a genius of a footballer.
Absolutely, yeah.
Always was, and the early stages indicated that, wow, this guy's going to put on a clinic. But then, obviously, Clonmore are very well coached, as we know. We've remarked upon it several times over last year. I think in some of those games last year, the way they were playing, both, we'll say, from a championship point of view and practice match point of view, they wouldn't have been far off winning intermediate, I would have felt. Just they were so on it, like. And after that early setback and that little adjustment, they really came to grips with things. They got 7 in a row. Shock put over some magnificent points. Luke Connolly put over a great one as well. And that little ingredient that you spoke about there with the youth, like the pace, that's what I have always been really impressed with them for. Now, in the second half, I will say, Grange came back into it. So it was a 7-2, and then they went a little bit further behind, and there was a response all of a sudden. Alan Fleming comes in, gets a goal. Things get a little bit hairy, get a little bit tough and physical as well. Maybe Clonmore get drawn into that a little bit too much and forget what they're about, and it gets really tricky coming down the home stretch where a high ball comes in, John Murphy gets a fist to it. I'm convinced there's a little divot in that goal mouth up on what do you call it, on the blue side. I'm nearly certain it hit, like it arches up like that towards the goal, but I'm nearly certain it hit that and came back out. Otherwise, we're looking at possibly something different. And then in a mad sequence of events, Clonmore get a penalty, which they missed down the far side. So look, maybe you're looking at it the point of view, both of those go in, it's the same result. But I don't know if that had gone in from John Murphy, would Grange allow the ball to get down the far side when you have that bit of momentum. So
no, and these are the things that when you're at games or when you're getting the type of feedback that you're able to offer here, it's that insight into the impact of particular incidents. On any day, and especially with the senior one, I know you'll be coming to. There was a particular score in the senior championship over the weekend that was definitely worth more than 1 point. We'll be coming to that, I'm sure. But look, the impact of guys like John Murphy, huge, big physical man, vastly experienced. Like you can't relax against these guys, you know. And in relation to the intermediate championship and the way that it runs in comparison to the senior, you will get more mistakes. You will get more turnovers. It won't necessarily be quite as structured or it won't be executed maybe quite as well. And mistakes happen. Like games are decided on things like that, you know. So it'll happen again.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you that question from an entertainment value point of view. I'd argue that intermediate can be that bit more enjoyable than senior, possibly for some of those reasons that you offered up. And with that, obviously, comes a lot of quality too. But, you know, a lot of people would have said over the last 2 years that the senior championship has produced boring games. Maybe you caught one or two of those the weekend, which you will come to. But it's not a bad segue, I suppose, to go into the one I saw on Friday, Bynnestown and Fenagh. Now, what I didn't put in the article was that Bynnestown were without Jamie Clark and Darren Nolan, who would be two huge players.
Massive players.
And then I suppose on the other side, I think Jack Tracy might have been on holidays. Craig Wall hasn't done a whole lot of training, so obviously that explains why he was on the line or whatever. It was an enjoyable game. There was a big talking point with an incident between Sean Murphy and Paddy McDonnell. I have looked at the clip about 50 times. I've changed my mind a few different times on it, and I've never before really seen a situation where it's either a straight red or it's not a foul. This is essentially what it has become. And I still don't really know. I mean, all I can say is from James Foley's point of view, he's got a different angle than the camera. Near enough the same angle probably that I saw initially, and I thought, geez, I think he's got that right. And then if you look at on the far side, sometimes you're thinking he's caught him on the head. It's fucking so hard because you have a split second, like, you know.
I think it's also important. The referee doesn't have 50 replays of it to go back. You're making a snap decision. And by the way, look, if it goes for you, great, and goes against you, you're not happy. But it's very difficult. There's one particular thing I need to say in relation to I wasn't at the game. No, I didn't see that game. I know the results, and I know that it was 2-10. Is that correct?
Correct.
Look, number one, it's one of the best and worst things about it. I mean, where you've got the familiarity there between Bagenalstown Gales and the Fenagh lads, and you've got that both in football and in hurling with Ballinkillen. Like that old familiarity really breeds a rivalry, and of course that rivalry breeds massive intensity and commitment. So it can easily happen that things maybe, I don't want to say spill over, but like they can really get physical. It can get tough. The other thing in relation to the two guys you mentioned, like you're talking two different sizes of men. You're talking about two very good athletes. But I have seen it firsthand with Sean Murphy that he is just so immensely powerful, right? If he got something even marginally wrong, marginally late, there's a big impact. He is just so powerful, you know. But don't get me wrong. I know at times he has deserved red cards. There's no question. I didn't see this instant, but I have definitely seen it before. And that he is just so powerful. It can look sometimes like it's overly aggressive or he's gone too far. It isn't always the case.
Yeah. No, I get that 100%. Paddy Mack got up somehow anyway and played on.
He's a great bit of stuff.
Super player.
He's a great bit of stuff.
I think Liam is his younger brother. He was, in my eyes, second best player on the pitch after Sean Murphy. Like, Bynnestown set up with Sean Wall and Shane Clark dropping back and that defensive shell, whatever you want to call it. And you know, it was difficult for Fenagh to break them down, but like Sean Murphy just went straight down the barrel of the gun the whole time, and they had to foul him most of the time. He got a couple of scores,
That's true. He's enormously powerful.
Sure, look, he's outrageous. But young Liam McDonald, for a guy 17 or 18 years of age, coming up from cornerback, I don't know what you'll make, but you've always said to that, finish out the run. If you're committing to a run coming up from that position in particular, and you don't get on the first play in around the middle third, finish it out, because the ball can be delivered in, you can get the pass off there, or if it goes through the hands, you're still on the receiving end of it.
Well, you had an example of that with Cathal Kelly in the Aero Loughlin game. I mean, if you had got, I'm not a betting man, but if you had odds on Cathal Kelly scoring a goal in the county grounds, you would have got long odds. But that's because he was up in that area of the field, he was being progressive, and he made sure he was in the place then to take that ball off the post. And I want to come back to that. But as regards Liam McDonald, I don't know Liam as well now. I know Paddy would have been involved in a little bit through cold squads and things like that. Lovely fella. Really, really good player and a really superb athlete. Like he has all the physical qualities you'd want now. He's a really good bit of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And look, we know what Bidenstown have there in terms of caliber and quality. Like Jack McCullough is one of those talents as well. You know, Jack probably not always consistent, and maybe that's a little bit of a slight. But in terms of talent, I mean, that chap has a lot of hurling and football. He's very capable. You know.
When I think of Jack McCullough, I often think of Fiacre Fitzpatrick there, because they're similar age. They're both really good dual players. They're both powerful. They're both physical, and like they're young guys. Jack is 21, I think, is he? Fiacre 21. Yeah. So like they're from the Bagenstown Gales point of view, those lads are exciting for them, because they really can progress, and if those guys are able to have a career similar to someone like Alfie Corcoran, like, you know, they're going to be a real threat now for a long time.
Yeah, for sure. So look, we'll rock on. I'm not forgetting Junior A games, which I'll come to in a moment, but I want to go to Netwatch Cullen Park, say Saturday evening. You touched on O'Loughlin Éire Óg, and like, let's face it, O'Loughlin haven't been given a prayer in this year's championship, which is a little bit disingenuous. They've got some really, really good players. You know, they've got 3 really good county players there. They've got another couple that are capable of playing county or have played county already.
Yeah.
It's not a surprise to me to see how, from the outside in, I haven't seen the game, to see how close they got to getting a result. I still do think they might get a result in this group. But what was the game like to look at, Mick?
It was a strange game. I mean, I think O'Loughlin went a couple of points up early on, and they actually could have had another one. There was a fairly straightforward free missed. Now, I'm not going to talk about missing frees. I missed more than my fair share myself. But like, they really could have had an extra couple of scores on the board. The goal really energised Éire Óg, and it was a little bit lucky, I'd have to say. It was a long enough range effort, I believe. Came back down off the post, and it fell to Cathal Kelly. Now, Cathal is a really superb player. Huge time for him, but you wouldn't be backing him to score goals. Éire Óg then, like, Éire Óg certainly looked like a team that were trying to find form. They had some poor wides. They kicked some unbelievably good scores, but then they'd follow it up with 2 or 3 wides. I think a player like Dara O'Brien encapsulates it fairly well. Like, Dara is one of the most consistent footballers in the county for years now. And he scored one really, really good point from a tight angle. But I think he was blown for over-carrying. I think he was blown for touching the ball on the ground. And that's not to single out Dara. It's just to say that Éire Óg were struggling to find form. But they sort of crept into a 5-point lead at half-time, I think. They tagged on one more after half-time, I think, to go 6 up, right? And you really were thinking, O'Loughlin are going to need goals here to get back into this. And just like that, they got 2. Aaron Hammond was really, really instrumental now. I think he got both of them. And one of them now, he won it, he dispossessed, turned it over in his own half-back line. I think he had been moved to centre-back at that point. He certainly was at some stage. But he covered the length of the field, lay off here and there, got it back and finished it well. I think the thing that really shows the difference between O'Loughlin and Éire Óg on the day, like, Éire Óg are able to bring in a guy like Cormac Mullins, vastly experienced. He wasn't on the field a minute or two, he'd scored a point, loads of possession, laid on a goal for Sean Gannon. Whereas O'Loughlin are really looking for the maximum from the guys you've mentioned. Mikey Bambrick, Shawnee Bambrick, Aaron Hammond. They're looking to get big performances then out of like a Tyg Roach and Niall Roach. Now, Tyg Roach is a player of huge potential. Tyg really has everything, I think, to be a superb player. Jordan Kelly is there at the back for them as well. And by the way, they got a really good tune out of their midfield. O'Loughlin were well organised. Their kick-out strategy was fairly inventive. They were able to go along to Shane Dooley and to Ian Atkinson, and they're really good ball winners. Rogue, on the other hand, because they didn't have, I think they had Murta Ware on the line, but he wasn't used. They had Kyle O'Byrne was there, but wasn't hugged out. I think he might be struggling with some little bit of a niggle. So because of that, they went short almost exclusively. And O'Loughlin were able to put a little bit of pressure on it there as well. But the big difference between the teams is the strength of the bench and the kind of spread of scorers they can get. They got a goal from Cathal Kelly, as I mentioned. They got a really good finish and a good goal from Benny Kavanagh. So they were able to get a spread of scores. Colm Hulton scored. Cormac Mullins, as I mentioned. Adam McCarron kicked a couple as well. They were able to get a spread, you know.
Yeah. If I'm right on this, I think 9 different scorers out of 11.
For Rogue.
Yeah.
I don't have that detail, but that would make sense. That would sound right.
That's impressive, you know.
It is, and again, it just shows. Like, I'll put it this way: someone like Ross Dunphy wasn't at his best for Rogue, right? Now, again, on his day, he's one of the best in the county. But when he wasn't at his usual level of performance, they can just take him out, which they did. And like, they're able to bring in, I won't necessarily say like for like, but they're able to bring in real quality there. And again, they're able to bring in youth. They brought in Mark Bean. They started young Brady. I think it was Josh Brady started the game. Owen Byrne started the game. You know, these are all, again, young players. And those guys freshen up the like of Sean Gannon and Benny Kavanagh and these fellas, you know.
Yeah, and there's a few guys last year that, although it wasn't their best year, they still benefit with a year's senior football under their belt. And that, you know, has an effect in year 2 or year 3, you know. And
and we're not even talking about the like of Shane Buggy, who's an established county man at this stage. You know, like, we're not even mentioning him. Rogue weren't vintage, right? They weren't, and I think it was 2-8, 3-8 in the end. I think that's the score. But Rogue have loads of improvement in them yet as well. Like we mentioned about Michael in the intermediate championship, as do O'Loughlin. O'Loughlin are well organised. They're fairly inventive off restarts. You know, they do have a number of threats. I mean, you have Seamus Kinsta there, we haven't mentioned. He's still capable of kicking a score. But they do need a lot from their big guys. They need a lot from Mikey Bambrick, from Aaron Ammon, from Shawnee Bambrick, the fellas we've mentioned, Niall Roach, Ty Roach. They really need those guys to fire to get a win.
Rathvilly Pal. So Rathvilly 210, Pal 8 points. Liam Gavin on his debut 2-7. Now, I was thinking Liam McDonald has been one of the best debuts I've seen for a defender. But
that's red hot.
In terms of a debut for an attacker, 2-7 is pretty sweet. 2-3 from play.
Yeah, like I listen. If you have 2-7 after your name, I don't care if they hit you on the head, bounce over the bar. Like, I mean, if you're amassing 2-7, that's a massive score. Like, 13 points, right? That's huge. In actual fact, 13. I think Liam Gavin scored on his own more than was the score of some combined scores in games. The only caveat I'd offer there is, with maybe 5 minutes to go, there was very little in it. It was 10-8. And at that stage, I think Conor Lawler had hit the post with one that could have gone over. Brian McMahon was black carded at a really sort of inopportune time for Palatine. Rathvilly had their own black card earlier in the game, Ryan Sibbald, but it was in the first half. It didn't have the big impact, I think, that the later ones did. So fair play to Rathvilly. They deserved their win. I think they were better. If there was one kind of concern for Rathvilly, I'd say I think they only had 3 scorers. So obviously Liam Gavin shot the lights out. 2-7 is phenomenal scoring. But if Liam was to have an off day or just didn't click, where are the scores coming from? I think the other scores were Brendan Murphy with an unbelievable score, if I remember, and Brian Murphy, I think. So look, all management will be looking at it going, we have a win on the board, and if you're getting a win and you're delighted with Liam Gavin scoring, the other side of your mind is going, Jesus, I'd like a better spread of scores. Do you know? From the Rogue perspective, we had a great spread of scores, but it'd be hard to pick out a player that you'd say really excelled or was at the top of his game and was more workmanlike. So it's all about the next game and just trying to work on the things that you think are a problem, as opposed to patting yourself on the back for things that went well.
Yeah, for sure. There was one incident in that game, Mick, that has caused a bit of debate, and that's Conor O'Doherty. Now, I have managed to get a clip, not of the actual incident happening, but of him getting up and coming off the field. And all I could say is it was worrying to see what he was like coming off the field, but even more worrying to hear that he came back on. Now, you were at the game. Do you have a particular view on that?
I was at the game, and it was a really heavy hit. And to be honest with you, not dirty at all. I don't think there was any malice in it. It was Ed Finnegan caught him with his shoulder. Conor Doherty had been mentioned, like what you mentioned earlier. He was coming out from the full back line, had given off a pass and was going to take a return. So he had all eyes on the ball. And it was just one of those things where he was really reaching for the ball and Ed Finnegan could line him up. There's also a little bit of a size mismatch there as well. Ed is a big man, very solid, and Conor, he's not small, but he's not the same stature. Now Conor, it was a very heavy hit, and it was really conspicuous in the games over the weekend, because there's so much of football now is around not bringing the ball into the tackle and not bringing it into contests. So look, he nailed him. There's no doubt about that. Conor was shook. There's no question about it, and I was surprised to see him come back on. I think we all were. The only thing I can say is you have to put your faith in the people that have his best interests at heart. He's a very determined young man. He's a tough bit of stuff. I was surprised, but like you got to put your faith in the physio and the medical people there, and Pal have good people there. So I was surprised to see him come back in, but he played fine when he came back on. And you have to really acquiesce to the people that are there saying, listen, we checked him, we're confident he's okay. The only thing I will say is, if there's a nuclear holocaust, going by that now, I think Conor Doherty will survive it. Like, I mean, he is hard as nails, getting up and carrying on after that,
Yeah, and that's, and this is only of games that we'll say us as a platform maybe have been at and covered the weekend, but I saw John Michael hitting Jamie Ansborough. I don't know how he got up straight away. Paddy Mack getting back up. I know you're talking about Conor Doherty getting back up and coming back on. We have tough buckos out there, but we want to make sure, obviously, that they're all okay and stuff too, I suppose. But I'll switch it across then to Sunday, and that brings us to another doubleheader. First one is an intermediate between Ballinabran and Carlow and Clonegall. Now, Mick, we don't blow our trumpets here now too much, but I discovered up to this point that we had 9 games out of 9 called correctly in the first 3 grades of
Mystic Meg.
Yeah, and then I was trying to just heighten this now a little bit and twist in the knife, and it was 12 consecutive if you include the junior, intermediate and senior hurling finals, one of which is 2-1 outsider. Now, unfortunately there's no odds and there was no tenner put down on that, but I'd be confident enough that we might get a week in Lanzarote or something out of it if that had came off. And it also probably means that the first 9 next week will be completely wrong. But anyway, Ballinabran and Carlow and Clonegall was the fixture. To be honest with you, I didn't see Ballinabran win it beforehand, simply because of the personnel
that they're missing,
that they've lost. And yes, Carlow and Clonegall would have done a lot of drinking, but there was, the rising tide lifts all boats. You had a week there to sort that out. And what I had forgotten actually was how much quality that Ballinabran actually still do have, even though they've lost so much good players. And that must have come to the fore, I guess.
Yeah, no, I'll be honest with you. I didn't see that game. That game was just finishing as I was coming in, because I was at the intermediate Kilbride road game.
Sorry, that's right. Yeah,
earlier in the day. Yeah. But I was following it on Twitter. I was following the scores. I think Ballinabran got a very good start. I think Liam McGill might have scored early for Kildavin, but I think Ballinabran took over, and I think they had 2 goals before half time. And that kind of 2 goals advantage means if you're tagging on a few points, you can keep them at arm's length. It also means that you're able to be fairly defensive. You can be cautious and just hit on the break. The players that they're missing, I agree with you on that. Was it Darren Lunny scored a penalty for Raheny on the weekend in Dublin? He's obviously operating at a high level up there. Is it Ben Dorgan has gone to Grey Cullen? And they're going well. They had a win against Stradbally on the weekend. Having said that, obviously Ballinabran are in a good place. Damien McMahon is out there and training. Obviously the spirit is good and the result is good. You're back to the thing of the intermediate championship though. Who's next then for Ballinabran? Ballinabran have
Well, Kildavin Donegal are playing Kilbride, so they have Éire Óg.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to give maybe a better reflection. I think you're probably going to have a little bit more scoring threat with Éire Óg, right? Even though they weren't prolific on Sunday afternoon there. But I think that's probably going to give us a better indication of where Ballinabrana are at, really. With Kildavin, what did they score overall? 11 points, I think.
10 or 11, I think. Yeah.
I think so. And like they weren't able to get a goal at any stage. It was actually a couple of goals that they got last year against St. Patrick's in the quarterfinal that was really crucial. They kind of did. From what I can gather, I think Ballinabrana did to Kildavin this game just gone what Kildavin did to Tullow last year. Couple of goals in the first half gives you a platform, gives you confidence. I wouldn't rule out those teams meeting again. You could easily get a different result.
Mm-hmm. I think I've used the term poor return, and actually to retract that, because it's not really a case where it's a poor return. 12 scores have won a lot of the games actually across the weekend. There was something slight tangent for a minute. You know, it would often be critical with the amount of times teams score in Carlow at senior level in particular. And I was just looking at across the border there, when you had Naas 210, Sarsfield is 10, the very same score with Bynasdown and Fenna, and 210, 10 to 12 times seems to have won a lot of games across the weekend. And you've Kildavin scoring whatever it was, and I must check it now just to be, right on the money with it.
I think it's 11. I think it's 11. I think they got the majority of their scores in the second half. Again, you might be able to check that there.
210. It was 210 to 9 actually.
9, right?
It was, yeah. But like 9 points got a draw in the senior game, which we
absolutely.
Which you might come on to. But I will be of the belief that some people say hit the tally of 16 points. There was a kind of an unwritten thing of trying to score 15 or 16 times that you would win most of your games. Is it?
Again, we've tried all sorts of ways of looking at it. You can go by quarters. It used to be the thing that in COVID times you're having water breaks and things like this, that you'd say you break the games into quarters, and see, listen, could we try and score 3 or 4 times per quarter, or at least. And if you're doing that, like, sure, you're in business. It's also things like teams are going and scoring bursts, like whereby it might look like there's a great score, but they might have got the vast majority of it in one half, and then actually score very little in another. If you have to drill down into it and see what's happening. For all the people saying that the Éire Óg O'Loughlin game, for instance, like 3-8, 2-8, it was actually fairly open, and the reason that you got so many goals, was because it was quite open at times. I don't know. Every game will take on a life of its own. If you're scoring 210, like Bagnallstown did and Ballinabrana did, that's 16 points. That's very healthy. Isn't that the equivalent of scoring 8 points per half? If you could score 8 points, if you could score 8 times per half, you're keeping the scoreboard ticking over,
You're going to be in the mix, yeah. So, and as it transpires, actually, not a bad little segue. A team that scored 6 times won the intermediate game that we spoke about. I actually had forgotten that you'd been over at that. Jeez, you covered some ground the weekend, boy. But
I was doing my homework, yeah.
1-5 Éire, 3 points. Kilbride. Now Kilbride didn't score from play in the whole game.
No.
Wasn't exactly a classic, I would say.
No, it's not. But again, I certainly wouldn't want to come on a podcast to start poo-pooing either of those teams. I think both of them are capable of improving from there. It was a classic thing of Éire Óg with youth and pace and kind of lots of nippy guys up against the more seasoned, physical, little bit older Kilbride guys generally. And okay, people will point to the fact that Kilbride didn't score from play. They were under pressure a lot because they were retreating back a bit. Éire Óg were going coast to coast, we'll call it. We're going from one sideline to the other with possession, just trying to find an opening. And they were very patient, Éire Óg were, I have to say. Éire Óg probably only scored 1-1 from play, I think, as well. You know what I mean? I think Lou Ramsbottom might have got 3 or 4 from frees. What I also will say is that Darragh Foley kicked one free and it could still be travelling there. I mean, he kicked it from the middle of the field into Ireland. He was nearly heading for Kilbride itself with it. It was a brilliant score. Luke Ramsbottom put over a free with his left from a very acute angle, and it was just a really super kick. But it's just an arm wrestle. It was 1-5 to 3 points, which tells its own story, scores at a premium. But it was a fairly comfortable 1-5 to 3-point win for Éire Óg, you know.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff.
The other thing about Éire Óg are kind of unique. Well, they are unique in the intermediate championship, is that it isn't their first team. And who's to say that they aren't going to lose a player to senior yet? Like, it is possible. If Mark Bean hadn't played for the seniors, he would have been playing for Éire Óg on the Sunday. And he's the very formidable player at intermediate level. So Éire Óg are unusual in that regard. If they were to lose one or two more to senior, it could have a big impact, you know.
Yeah, no, for sure. It definitely shouldn't go unstated. And every year it is a factor in how they progress in that second grade, I believe. But yeah, I'll just touch a bit on the junior A stuff first. Loughlin Bridge, late free there, nudged them over to Nyland, 12 points to 1-8. Fighting Cocks are intriguing me with just in terms of who's over them. Like, I think they'll max out, given that you've got two good guys there. You've got Morris Brown and Tony Bulger. Now, Tony Bulger is a serious operator. I wouldn't mess with him. You know, the chest is out, the arms are down. He won't take any shit. And Morris has a good personal touch of people, you know.
Yeah,
and a good record.
Oh, you got 100%, yeah. Tony and Morris are kind of like bad cop, worst cop. I'm not going to say who's who, right? But no, but they are, and they've worked well together previously with county under-20s and things like that. But they are very good. I mean, you'll go a long way in the country, I think, to find more capable guys and a management team at junior level. I think the other thing that's noteworthy about it as well, you had Sean O'Brien playing full forward, and unless I'm wrong, I think he scored 4 or 5 points, right? So you might have it in your head, which I would, that his physical presence, his strength, is that kind of thing, right? If he's chipping in with 4 or 5 points, you're in business. And I think Mark Carpenter was tugged out for O'Hanrahan's, I think, right? And again, you describe him like a pair of Levi's. What they say, quality never goes out of style, right? But I don't know. I'm not sure who the Blues have next. Who they got next? Like, the Blues will be needing a win next in that group now.
The Blues have Tinryland because Loughlin Bridge have the Cocks there Thursday.
Right.
And I'll actually go through the full run now in a moment. But I get where you're coming from with this. Yeah. I think I do. Go on.
Well, it's just it can start to get away from you. Like, I mean, because you've lost the first game, which is what you mentioned at the very top of the podcast, you have to hit the ground running. So if you've lost your first one, you lose one more now, you're really in bother. So, by the way, Loughlin Bridge now, who I know you'll know very well now inside out. So they have 2 or 3 guys there with inter-county experience and been on the county panels last couple of years. They almost shocked Clonmore last year, and there they are, only getting over Tinryland's second team. So all of these things, like, they are competitive, and I know people sometimes look at maybe the quality of it, or they'll go, the football is not a great watch sometimes. It's very competitive stuff. Like, it's compelling when you're there in the middle of it and you're getting these close games, you know?
Yeah, and the other thing that I think, because it goes back to the lack of scores occasionally, is the lack of credit that defenders actually get within Carlow. I mean, yes, there is occasions where the quality in general through error is not where maybe you'd like it to be, but we've had serious defenders for a long time, and I believe that we do them a disservice whenever we say about X, Y, and Z. There's only a certain amount of scores. Well, no, actually, there's some pretty good tacklers out there. There's good man markers, and it's not just all about blocking things up with every team either. You know, the skill of defending is something that a lot of coaches have tried to paper over by getting bodies back, as we know in the modern game. But there's some guys, like, I go back to that chap Liam McDonald, like, the hands in, hands out. It's such an underrated and undervalued skill in the game. We talk about the greatest footballers of all time. Most of the time we're talking about forwards. But we've had some exceptional defenders that have just played you, not in a dirty way, but just literally played you by the game, by the book, and been better because their skill set is better. You know, I often feel that happens sometimes.
No, I'd agree with that. A defender is walking a tightrope sometimes there too, in terms of fouling close to goal. Space, denying space is often, like, if you're up against a quicker guy, you've got to be clever and say, listen, if I can't beat him for space, it's got to be anticipation. It's got to be. There was 2 very good examples of that I felt in the Mount Leinster Rangers Tinryland game, which I know you want to come to.
Yeah, go on to it anyway. Yeah.
Oh, in that game, you have someone like Richard Cody, right? Now, Richard Cody has been around forever, and I'm not trying to retire him or anything like that. I'm a huge Richard Cody fan, like, right? But he'd be the first to tell you he's not physically where he was 4, 5, 6 years ago, right? But again, he played it really clever, was on a lot of ball for Rangers, and was able to come up the field and actually pick passes and so on. Now, they didn't always work. Really showed a lot of composure. And on the other side, again, if we're going to stay with the defenders team, is the Jonah Dunn. Like, I thought Jonah Dunn now really had a very good game for Tinryland. Very solid. He was up against Eddie Byrne at times. He was up against Chris Nolan at times, because there was a lot of movement. It was not necessarily one guy for one man. There was lots of movement in it. But he was really solid and came up and kicked a really good second half score as well when scores were hard to get. So Jonah Dunn really impressed me on the weekend now. And when Tinryland are looking at who's coming next, it's Bagnallstown next for them. Is that correct?
Correct. On Friday night, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, like, they're looking at Bagnallstown. Jonah Dunn, I don't know, will he be earmarked to go on to something like a Jamie Clark if he's back, a Robbie Kane maybe, a Paddy MacDonald? I don't know, but I thought he had a really good game now on the weekend, Jonah Dunn, and Richard Cody.
Yeah, the one lad they wouldn't want to take their eye off is Danny Doyle.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, he was superb the other night too, in the absence of Jamie Clark. I mean, the forward structure at times interested me, because obviously when you get 12-13 behind the ball, you're looking at a situation where maybe you've got a lad on the between the 65 and 45, and another guy maybe on the edge of the square, and they break out to the side. But with the three bodies, I don't know what, like, Danny Doyle was, what do you call it, in line with the guy, we'll say, on the 65, or in between the 65 and 45, but he's out on the sideline. Now, that actually intrigued me and interested me, and I was trying to figure out what's the substance within that. But it's a serious trio they had left up there. Like, you've got Danny Doyle, Robbie Kane, and Keane Doyle.
Yeah. Look, they have a lot there. Again, I didn't mean to. They have lots of good players. But it's just what you mentioned there. Sure, it's giving you a decision to make as a defender or as an opposition. If he's drifting out into that position, do you say, right, I'll go follow him, and therefore if he gets possession, he can burn me, and I'm running back towards my own goal. If you don't follow him, if you don't commit a man to go out there to him and shut him down, sure, he's in space. So I would, like, I mean, from my perspective, even though I didn't see that particular game, you have to be given the opposition questions to answer, puzzles to solve. You can't just set it up and listen, I'm going to be here and try and mark me. So someone like him, guys with pace, guys with physicality, if you can get them into space, you go follow them. It means they have a path back to goal. They have a route off the sideline. If you don't go follow them, you're leaving them free, able to take possession a bit cheaply. So it's a constant chess match,
Mm-hmm. Right, so let's go straight to the most bizarre talking point of the weekend, which was Carl Gaffney's own point. There's clips of this in circulation as well. Yeah, look, to be honest, like, I feel a bit sorry for him, because you can see what he was attempting to do, right?
Yes.
It's come off his instep from what I can see. He's trying to either punt it or go with the outside to switch the play over to the far side. It's lucky that it's not gone in the net. It's bounced over the bar. What were you thinking at the time when this is unfolding in front of you?
Asher was bizarre. Like, I just could not believe it. And it seemed to take an eternity to come to a stop, because he was actually quite a bit away from the goal. He was much closer near the stand side. You can see what he's doing. He was going to drill a ball across the 20-metre line to the far side of the field. It's a classic thing as well, right, of a keeper makes a mistake, it sticks out like a sore thumb. Everybody's talking about it. Whereas someone does that further out the field, like, it's just forgotten about. I miscued a kick, big deal. So it was just one of those things. Like, in actual fact, the only way that Tinryland could view it was that it was lucky it didn't go on the back of the net. Like, a point was actually not a bad result, because I was really, where I was looking at it, I said, this is going in the goal, But even though Tinryland scored immediately after it, I think Mark Mullen making his full debut, he had a great game as well, by the way. I thought Mark Mullen was excellent for Tinryland. He scored a brilliant point, which still put 2 in it, right? I think it was 9-7. But there's no doubt that own score, that own point, did seem to give a lift to Rangers. It just seemed to pick them up a little bit, even though Tinryland scored after it again. And it rattled Tinryland, I think. It was just bizarre thing to happen. But a fella miscues out the field, or he miscues a ball at the far end, and it's not talked about. It's just rotten old luck for Cathal Gaffney, you know.
Yeah, and like I'll say just a couple of things on that before we finish up. His kickouts are pretty good by and large. In fairness to him, pretty good kickouts. And also, it's gas when people say let him have it, he doesn't want it. That man was at the heart of their defence 2 years ago out the field.
Oh
That
yeah,
argument is redundant. It's fucking Godzilla stuff, like.
yeah, I totally. And I tell you, because they won the game, it's not being spoken about. Johnny Fury came out and joined into the play, and like Johnny's a very capable footballer, full stop. He played all his underage football out the field. So Johnny Fury came out and was out pushing out, involved in the play. And I think for one of them, like there was a turnover there, not necessarily on Johnny, but he was out of position, and it just created a bit of panic. These things, if that had happened in the first 5 minutes, you mightn't even be talking about it. It was the timing of it. It was the weirdness of it. Like, it's the weirdest own point I've ever seen. A fella called Cathal Smith from Meath scored an own point in a Trench Cup final I was playing in many, many years ago, right? He fisted it over his own bar. Like, so you can sort of understand it, like, as in he just gave a hand pass too much juice and it goes over the bar. It was just so weird, the Cathal Gaffney one, because like it was a long way out, like I mean, and it bounced over, like it was just slow motion stuff, you know. But look, if Tinryland go on and get a win the next day, or go on and win the championship, it'll be just an interesting kind of a bit of a kind of pub quiz question or something, you know.
So it begs the question, Mick, how does a team with virtually no football done go out and get a result, albeit a draw? It's still a result that many people wouldn't have felt was, not going to say possible, but unlikely, given the fact that they had very little football played. How does that actually happen, where the opposition have concentrated solely on this day for so long, all the eggs in the basket, full focus, and a team comes with nothing done and gets a result? Is there a simple answer to this?
I don't know if there's a simple answer, but I'm not trying to be wise after the event. I, honest to God, anticipated a really tough challenge for Tinryland. Like, okay, I'll take what you're after saying there and flip it around a bit. Maybe the best preparation to win a championship is to have won one already, isn't it? I mean, they have won a championship, right? And produced a final performance, you know, to really hammer it home against St. Mullins, right? They also have good players. Like, I mean, Chris Nolan wasn't vintage on Sunday. He's a good footballer. Richard Cody, good footballer. Kevin MacDonald, very good footballer, right? If Kevin MacDonald wasn't such a kind of a hurling focus exclusive guy, he has all the physical attributes, he has the game sense and everything to be an outstanding footballer. Plus, it's just the Rangers factor. I mean, when did you ever see a Rangers team? When's the last time you say, they weren't pushed, or those lads weren't up for it, or that's just a culture and a mentality with them, you know? So I don't know. I wouldn't get into that. As regards not having much football done, Tinryland only scored 9 points, right? So I mean, we're back to the thing of, if you've only scored 9 points, you are liable. I mean, all Rangers had to score to get a result on the day was 9 points, and I haven't even mentioned Faker Fitzpatrick. Like, he put over a free in the first half. You know, he had the wind behind him, and I saw him talking to Brian O'Donoghue, who was modest enough. He played it down. A really brilliant kick. The 45 he took near the end, I know it was a little bit of luck on it that it skimmed over the bar in the end, but that was into a gale, a strong breeze, and like he really connected with that well to get it that far. So like, I don't know, I think that narrative of maybe a team that has been focusing on hurling, that's true. I accept that. I hear that. But if they're able to keep low-scoring games, if they're able to keep it relatively tight, they're going to be a real threat, I think, Rangers still. And they also have the impetus, like if you're down going to train and down in Boris there, they're preparing for the Kilkenny Senior Champions. Like, they're going to be training with an intensity in terms of physicality and in terms of driving each other on. That's going to be as hot as what Rogue are doing, or Pal, or Philly, you know?
Yeah, it's definitely advantageous. Before I come to one of the latter few questions that I have, and thanks again for giving up your time, I really do appreciate it, right?
No problem.
The other two junior results, Ballin big winners over O'Loughlin, and Palatine big winners over St. Mullins. Now, I went with St. Mullins in that one. Wise enough choice, of course, but Pal absolutely brutalised them. I did put a caveat in there. I didn't know who Pal had available to them. But look,
Yeah.
we'll take it. We'll take our bet. We got 9 out of 12 right, Mick. That's 75% return on any man's language.
Take that.
And we might retire on it. The same way, do you know what? If I was Liam Gavin, I'd nearly retire now as well after scoring 270 in my debut. And I'd live off it for the rest of my life. But,
I hope he's not thinking like that. If he can score 270, he can go do it again, you know?
Absolutely, yeah, of course, tongue in cheek stuff. Now, I have to talk about the elephant in the room in relation to this weekend, and that is Electric Picnic. And we have a full round of fixtures. So we fixtures Thursday, Friday. Well, Thursday probably wouldn't affect the money anyway. We fixtures Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And it is a big topic, right? It's a massive topic. So how I'll frame the question is, I'm not going to talk about, we'll say, how it would affect you directly, because I know maybe it's not a place that you would find yourself at this coming weekend. But if you were to be over a team this year, Mick, right? What way would you be feeling about this as a manager? A few months ago, where you don't know if it's on or not, but now that it is on, what instruction are you giving to your players? I suppose it's depending on what night your game is for a start. My take before I get you to come in on your answer is we've put ourselves in the position where we can be criticised for having games on this weekend, and that might be something to consider, but we are where we are, hence my questions. So I'll bring you in.
I certainly it wouldn't be my form to say or lay down law to lads, you can't do this or you can't do that, right? You'd ask them to prioritise. It's something I'm on record on, is that you would try and show consistency to players, that you wouldn't chop and change training too much. You'd like them to have a life away from the football field, and that's not to be all too benign or kind about it. That's kind of saying, look, I've offered you consistency. I've tried to be fair with you. I don't want to hear any excuses about not being there then, right? That's the original preface and all of that. As regards the Electric Picnic, I suppose it is something that this age cohort are really interested in. We've mentioned all the young players that we've so far today, exciting young talents, and they want to have a social life and everything as well. I suppose it's avoiding the conflict in the first place is probably the way to go about it. Like, I mean, now that there's conflict, if there is, I'm not across it all that much. It's a pity. You'd like lads to be able to have their social life and to have their sport and to have it all. I don't know. I would say in Aerogue, I don't think there'll be too many Aerogue lads looking to go to Electric Picnic because they have the bit between their teeth this year after last year. I'd say it's something similar for Conroyland. Maybe it's not going to be as big an issue for someone like St. Patrick's because they have a really good win on the board. And maybe it won't be as big a clash with their game. Is their game on a Friday or a Sunday now? Friday.
Yeah.
So therefore, certainly what I'd be saying in that situation is, look, Friday all week your focus is on the next game. Let's get a win there against Grange if you can, and sure then enjoy the weekend, and we'll see you on Tuesday or Wednesday, whenever it is. It's a pity. If it could be avoided, I think is the main thing. You don't want conflict if you can, you know. But listen, each of these clubs will have their own context. They'll have their own things to lay down. I suppose it isn't a great thing if management are trying to dictate to players, or players feel I'm not being given flexibility here, or I don't know. It's tricky stuff.
Look, it definitely is, and I was looking at when the first round of Leinster is, I think the weekend of 21st of October. So if, for argument's sake,
there is flexibility there, you're saying.
Yeah, if the gap weekend was to be this weekend, then you would have a 2-week gap before that fixture. And that's just a senior one. I haven't gone to intermediate and junior, which is something I'll hold my hand up and looked at. And then that possibly could be a week. If it was, say, a week earlier for junior and intermediate, I get where people might say, well, a week is a bit of a quick turnover. Having said that, I've seen Portlaoise play games 2 days in a row, win a county final on a Saturday, win the first round Leinster the next day. Ardsley Cruise did the same. Not something I'd encourage, and I'm not saying that I would be in favour of that happening, but if there's a week there, let's give the guys the opportunity. I would say, if you look at hurling finals weekend, in terms of guys that are somewhat, it's maybe disingenuous to say somewhat serious, but have a bit of a focus on the big ball game as well, you're looking at probably 3 clubs that are effective, and are effective maybe in the sense that they could be playing again the following week, whereas everyone else has had at least a 2-week gap, if not 3 weeks, if they haven't made it to the semi-finals of their hurling championship. So look, I mean, it's not something I want to go mad into, but it's something that a lot of people are talking about around the county, and if I don't talk about it, I'll get my arse kicked
Oh,
for it as well. That's what we're here for. So
I know that look, as I said to you, I haven't been able to offer you any great insight on that, right? But the one thing I could say to you maybe is, I remember a couple of years ago down with a Kilkenny club, doing a bit of work with one of the Kilkenny clubs there, and I remember there being not an inquest, but there was a concern that, are these lads focused and ready for championship, because they were thinking of going to the electric picnic 2 weeks away from a championship match, right? And it's just to say to you, like, they were that serious about what they were doing there. They felt that this going on a fortnight before a championship match was maybe a sign of lads losing focus and that kind of thing. Whereas what we're discussing is lads going in the middle of a championship. I don't know. I don't think there's a blanket answer or rule on it. If you could avoid the clash, and therefore people have a choice to socialise at things or attend festivals and things, is great. I suppose if there's a clash now, there's nothing you can do about it from this year except maybe possibly learn for it for next year's championship. It's a bit of a fudge, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the joys of it. Well, I tell you, instead of going into the fixtures or whatever this weekend, look for predictions and stuff, I'm actually going to do a little piece on it, and I'll put up on the website in terms of Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and we'll probably put predictions on it as well, just to see can we get back on the horse again and start saying something right. But Mick, I really appreciate your time. We'll chat again, of course, over the duration of the championship, and the best luck at everything. I know you're busy, you're involved with a lot of teams. I don't know how you do it. Glutton for punishment probably is one way of putting it, but I appreciate you giving up your time here today, and thanks a million for coming on. All right.
Cheers, Kevin. Keep up the good work.
The Left Wing Backs coverage of the Carlow Football Championships is brought to you in association with Talbot Fitness Carlow, Connolly's Top Line Biddenstown, Scott's Bouncing Castles, J&J Services Tullow, Seamus Byrne Electrical, your number one for pitch floodlighting installation, Milano's Takeaway Biddenstown, PFT Travel, the Arboretum Garden Centre, Ray Whelan Limited, Arch Spas and Carlow Electrical Services.